seriously? Really? Don't bark at me. Dude, seriously? Really? You're gonna keep barking at me? Are you helping? You're not helping. You're such a camera whore. Hi, I'm Stacy Budge Camison, and this is the second video in which I show you how to make this yarn. Anyway, this all came about from my private Facebook group that is for my newsletter peeps, and I'll put a link down below on how you can sign up for my newsletter. Anyway, Cheryl had asked me how to make this yarn. Last week I showed you how to card the bat, and this week I'm going to show you how to actually spin the yarn. Now if you missed last week's video, I'm going to put the link down below and you can check it out there. So otherwise, let's get spinning. If you missed part 1, I'm going to put a link down below on how to card the bat for this yarn. So last week, as you know, we carded up this bat. Anyway, so I'm going to tell you a few things before I sit down at the spinning wheel and show you how I'm going to spin that yarn. First of all, I want to talk about the spinning wheels. I'm going to be using my Louette 51 S51 DT, and they don't make this wheel anymore, but it's very similar to the Louette S10. And actually a lot of the Louette wheels kind of spin about the same. And this is my go-to wheel. This is the wheel that I learned to spin on. Now generally it comes with this regular flyer here. Let me take this off. This flyer, but you can buy an art flyer, and I bought this off of somebody on Etsy, and I'll put a link down below. But yeah, this is the art flyer that I'm going to use to spin this yarn, and basically it just replaces that other one, and it turns this. It has a much bigger orifice, and it has a big hole right here as opposed to these hooks. So if you're going to add in any big chunky bits, then that usually works better for art yarn. However, I've spun many an art yarn on this flyer, and in fact, if there's not a lot of super chunky or textural bits, this flyer will work just fine. I also have a Spinolution, which I specifically got for art yarn, but to tell you the truth, I'm going to show you an auto wrap method of plying, and the hook bar orifice for the Spinolution doesn't work with doing auto wraps. I do however have this, which it builds an orifice, a bigger orifice, and it just replaces that other bar right. Oh, this part came off. It just replaces that bar right there. And that works better if you're going to do art yarn, but with an auto wrap. Otherwise, I just prefer using my Louette. That's my go-to. Another couple of things that I like to do, I like to make sure that I have, let me move this out of the way here. I like to make sure that I have a good stool. And actually I'm going to use my yoga mat. The yoga mat I usually put down underneath my wheel and my stool because it kind of helps keep that wheel from walking away from me as I'm spinning. Another thing that also helps keep the wheel from walking away from you as you're spinning is that you make sure that you have a stool that puts your to where you can get your knees right up under your feet. You're going to want to have your knees right under your feet and use your feet to treadle. Now I've done it before where I've done it like this, and that puts a strain on your shins, and it also starts to push your wheel away, and it also made my wheel a little wobbly because it's pushing on areas of your wheel and pushing a lot of your weight into the structure of your wheel, and it might weaken part of that structure. So if you can, get your knees right under your feet, right underneath your knees, and make sure you have a seat that's gonna do that, and you're gonna use your feet to treadle. It's not, of course, you know, when you have a belly like mine, it's not going to give you a lot of room here, but that's that's going to be the way to go. And again, put your yoga mat underneath your wheel, and that's going to help that as well. All right, another thing that I wanted to talk about is the thread I'm going to be using. Now, I use this mill end. You may not be in a part of the country with textile mills who are closing down and getting rid of their stuff. So, you know, I have access to mill ends because I live in North Carolina. However, I find it, serger thread will work very well with the auto wrap as well. You also might just use regular sewing thread, and if you do, you'll want to put your sewing thread down onto a lazy Kate to kind of keep it from dancing all over the room and getting into a tangled mess. Either put it on your lazy Kate, and if it doesn't fit on your lazy Kate, then you can drop it into a little container, and then that way it'll kind of hold it in there as you're pulling the thread off and it's bouncing around. Otherwise, you might want to put this on your lazy Kate as well, because it is kind of lightweight and it might bounce around as you're pulling the thread off to do the auto wrap. Otherwise, like I said, this cone I don't use. I usually just set it on the floor in front of me, and it's not usually an issue because this has enough weight around on it that it's not going to go flying around. So anyway, that's the preliminary stuff. I'm going to change the camera angle and I'm going to show you how to spin this yarn. All right, Fiberistas, let's get spinning some yarn. All right, to begin with, as I mentioned, I've got this cone yarn. If you're using the thread, you'll need to either put it in a lazy Kate or put it in a bowl to keep it from jogging around, but this is going to be heavy enough to kind of stay put. So, where should we find the end? Alright, so the first thing I usually do is I take up that excess there, and I put this, the drive band, right now I have it in the middle, kind of in the middle, on the middle groove. You don't need it to be super high, a super low spinning, only because I'm not making a terribly fat yarn. I'm making something probably on the bulky side of worsted. But if you're going with a bulkier yarn, then you'll want to put your drive band at the very top, but I usually keep it kind of in the middle of the roll. Alright, so I'm going to put that thread through my loop on my leader, pull my leader up towards the top. Alright, so I'm going to just start with a chunk that I pulled off of there and just start spinning this right together with that leader yarn. Right. And let that slack of the thread get taken out. Now what I'm doing, instead of holding this thread with the fiber that I'm working, I'm just going to let it hang out. It's just going to sit down here. It's going to just sit here right at the tip of the orifice, and I'm just going to not really pay that much attention to it, other than to make sure it doesn't get wrapped up in this part of the flyer, which sometimes it might do. But I'm going to just let it hang out, and I'm just going to gradually pull that fiber. And when I come across little bits, like that's one of those interesting little bits of curl from the fin locks, I'm going to not really pull that down in there. I'm going to let some of that lock structure come alive right there. Alright, so usually I just pay attention inch by inch as I'm pulling and going pretty slow. And as I come across, bits of texture, just, on the fly decide if I want to smooth it into the yarn. You can see where it becomes part of the color, or if I want it to pop out and leave itself as a bit of texture. Alright, so you just kind of keep going on. Now here again I have a little bit of Angora. That might be an interesting bit of texture, so I'm just going to see if I can let that, pull that out, fluff that a little bit. Alright, and I just kind of keep pulling and assessing as I go. Alright, so I found a bit of vegetable matter, pull that out. sometimes I can tell that I'm getting a little thick right there, so I'm going to try and smooth some of that down to get the thickness the same, but I'm going to let that be a little bit of a lump right there. You see, and all the time I'm just ignoring that thread, and that thread, I don't know if you can see right here, the thread is just kind of loosely wrapping and tangling around that yarn, and that's adding a different type of texture. You can see right there. So I'm going to just keep proceeding, and that's pretty much it. You just kind of, as you go, you know, decide if you want to pull that texture out a little bit and make it smooth and let the auto wrap be the hero, or if you want to, like, here's that little bit of brown. I want that brown to kind of pop. So I'm going to let it, see, I kind of cupped it to make a little bit of a cocoon. And just kind of go. Just, you know, a lot of times too, you'll just have to play with it, and as you come across the textures, just see what happens. You know, a lot of it's, you might be making some mistakes that you don't love, but overall it's going to be okay. And I'm just trying to pay attention too to keeping the thickness relatively smooth. Now here I'm coming across an area that's going to be a little bulky, so I'm going to dig some of that out. And I'm going to tighten it because I'm starting to feed. It's not going in as fast as I want. There you have it. I mean, that's pretty much it. So inches so you can just see. And also try to keep my posture, because I tell you, I tend to want to. Now here's an interesting little bit right here. I don't know if you can see that little, so I'm going to try and not let that get tight into that twist. Smooth it just a little bit, but I'm going to let some of that, let that texture shine through. So that's it. So if you want it to be smoother, you kind of pinch a little tighter, or at least, you know, hold it as it's running through. And if you want it to be, if you want to show off any of that texture, then I might even just open my fingers up and let that texture pop out. Here's a little bit of something right there. More vegetable matter. Alright, so there you have it. I'm gonna put this, speed this up a little bit and just continue to show you guys how I spin it. You can watch me complete this yarn in double time. So now here's an interesting piece. Here's a piece of remnant yarn that I threw in there. Here's what I like to do with that. A lot of times I'll take the clippings from when I'm weaving in my ends and cut them into little bits and card them into the yarn. And sometimes to get that to make a texture, I'll tuck that tip into the middle and then let it twist around. So then what I like to do is get it right to the edge of that orifice and then hold it there and let that auto wrap yarn wrap around that little bit, just a little bit more, and that'll hold that texture in. So I'm going to try it again with that chunky brown piece right there. So I'm going to get it right to the edge and just hold it, and that's going to wrap that yarn, that plying thread around that section. I don't know if you can see where it wrapped it around it pretty tight in that area. Alright, so again, when you are letting it not feed, you see the auto wrap is tighter on that yarn. But when you're feeding it, it wraps loosely around that yarn. Here you see I got a little thick spot that I wasn't that crazy about. So I'm going to actually just kind of tug on that a little bit. See if I can, in that way, stretch it out in that area just a little more to make it a little more even. I didn't want that big old fat spot. And conversely, I have a thin spot right here that I don't want. So what I can do is take some of my fiber and just push it right there. Put that right on top and then let the auto wrap around it. So you can see I'm starting to get my yarn on here. All right, it's time to move that just a little bit. Another thick spot. So what I'm gonna do is untwist it a little bit and then pull on it to kind of thin that area out. See here really well where I just held on and did a long draw here and allowed that yarn to wrap up around this one little brown section. And I like that because there's a contrast between that brown color and the color of my thread, and I think that adds a nice little accent right there. I'm gonna have to be conscious to try and repeat that maybe a couple of times. Okay, now here's a lock. So to do this, I'm just going to basically get my hands off of it and slow down so I can control. You can see here. So there's just a light wrap around it, kind of holding it in, but otherwise that lock, and I could even go back if I wanted to and maybe tease some of that out of there, but for now I'm just going to leave that. Again, here's a little bit of a thin spot right here, so I'm just going to break off this and then do kind of like a core spinning technique, getting some of that fiber on there. There we go. I'm going to leave it kind of light right there. here's some more locks that I have carded in. I'm going to just kind of let them wrap loosely. Just wrap loosely. You can see how wrapping that loosely, it just kind of tangles it just a little bit alongside of that auto wrap. Alright, so there you have it. I'm going to skein this up and give it a little bit of a warm bath to set the twist, and then I'm going to let it dry, air dry overnight, and then we'll be done. So there you have it. That's how you do the auto wrap and how you make that art yarn. Hey Fiberistas, okay, so here we are. It's the day after, and the yarn has dried overnight. It's still a little damp, but anyway, here it is. So yeah, there's the yarn. It's used in the same method that I use to spin this yarn. Anyway, so there you have it. Again, my name's Stacy Budge Camison. Hey, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, or share it with your friends. Anyway, again, my name is Stacy Budge Camison, and I'll talk to you next time. Happy knitting and spinning. No, don't, whatever.